So to kick things off, thank you, Chris, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Eric.
I'm excited to have you. We've gotten to spend some time together in some office hours, and you've been a veteran of Scribe. So I'm excited to have you here. Your book has been out for a really long time. But before we get into the sort of results of the book and what you've been doing with it, I want to just set the stage. So can you give us a little bit of your background and what you've been up to that led to writing a book in the first place?
Yeah, I've just had one of those lives and careers that's meandered a lot, and I had to find a thread for that. And really, what it came down to was idea building. So, through marketing lenses, through stand-up comedy, through writing, through leading innovation programs all over the world, it's kind of just been this like, how do the best ideas happen? And that's just kind of been a spark of curiosity that's just driven me forward, and led me to the book eventually.
What did the common threads turn out to be? Like that is a fun and wide ranging set of things to meander through.
Well, Eric, you have to read the book. No,
okay, all right, fine.
No. For me, like I have a degree in engineering, right? And I went to shout out to Michigan State Spartans.
Go green.
Go white. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, all right. That's going to be a whole other conversation then. So yeah, like I got an engineering degree, worked at Chrysler, and then I always had this like draw towards entertainment. And so there was just kind of these two very different disciplines. One is very scientific, mechanical, methodical. Another one is like, what if this was a concept, right? and let's play with that. And so I think both of those muscles have just continued to evolve, where I try to bring some form of entertainment value to the things that I do, but all of it is kind of creative problem solving. Whether it's like, you've heard a dozen jokes about dating, right, from 30 different comedians, but like the next person that does it has to think of it, presenting it in a different way that the audience reacts to, that people go like, oh, I feel that. And that is also true for me. And I think the same thing happens in, entrepreneurship, another social media platform, another AI tool, another thing that we've seen before, but how do I do it differently and in a way that's a little bit more sticky, a little bit more long lasting and easily monetizable? And also the thing that I really started to nerd out about over the last few years, especially like kind of kicked off with the book, is just what are the internal mechanisms that are going on and what are the synapses that are firing emotionally and scientifically that are in the way or also fueling the thing that I'm trying to build and create.
Very cool. So when you started writing the book, did you have a clear sense, or was the book a sort of method of figuring out?
Well, luckily, so it was coming off the tail end of me having done probably 300 interviews with folks in the innovation economy. I'd also, at the time, was running the innovation practice for the largest media agency in the world. And so not only was I practicing innovation, I was also like just being really nosy about people who were in the innovation economy and like people of notes, whether there's some celebrities or celebrity entrepreneurs or like a 9-year-old kid who figured out a way to raise $1 million for his best friend's disease. And it was just like extracting these principles. And so I was able to organize it through working with Scribe. It's funny because I was like, I think I'm going to do an A to Z guide, right? And just like make some words up that are definitions. And you guys were like, nah, you don't want to do that. And so I spent a few weeks just kind of going back to the drawing board. And what I landed on was the 10 essential rules for breaking essential rules, right? If you are going to like, oh, here's how everything is done, innovation goes, nah, we're going to try it a little bit differently this time. So you have to know what those rules are in order to like navigate them in your own way. And that's what I started to find. Like, I think one of the best driving questions in working with Scribe was, what are some common questions you get asked about the innovation process? And I was like, oh, okay. They kind of all like, whether it's sports or deep tech or something, analog, it's like, oh, there are certain things that still are like resonate and are the thread, going back to your other question, throughout those different verticals and mechanics.
Yeah, I think it's such a cool, like it is the essential rules for breaking essential rules is cool because I feel like there's so many truisms around this of like, the great artists break the rules, but they followed them first. They know how and when to break the rules. And that's how you get that mix of things that you sort of alluded to in the comedy world was like, it has to feel both familiar and fresh and useful, like all at the same time. That kind of like the parameters of creative problem solving. So you got to know, yeah, which barriers to knock down so that it feels fresh, and which to leave in place so that it feels familiar and useful and still solves a problem for,
Absolutely.
yeah, your audience, your reader, your user, whatever it is.
Oh yeah. No, it is a little bit of a matrix of things to navigate, and I think keeping, a lot of folks who have an idea, whether it's you're a startup founder or you're a CEO of a 10,000 person organization, it's like you have some vision of the future, and that vision doesn't always match the baby steps that you need to take. And I
Yeah.
think you're like, oh, well, unless we get all these 25 things in place, then we need to pause and hold on it. And one of the best rules of the game is like start where you are. We've all
Hmm.
toothpicked a thing together and we're like, oh, well, it'll stand up on its own. If we can just make it last for this amount of time. And kind of what you're alluding to on a more macro scale is this concept that I love and I talked about in the book is just like some of the best innovations come from constraint. When you don't have
Hmm.
enough time, resource, know-how, bandwidth, money, like there's a long list of things you wished you had in order to make the move that you want to make. And so like that can be a really emotionally confronting space. It's like,
Yeah.
the frustration or the sadness or the self-worth or the doubt or whatever else comes up. And I think it can be, like, it's going to sound altruistic, but it can be a really healing process building anything if you're aware and open to that like avenue.
Yeah. The constraints are your friend and enable a creativity that you might not have had otherwise, or embracing the constraint maybe keeps you from being blocked by an illusion. I feel like for some
Mhm.
people, it's a way to say like, oh, I don't have this, so I can't achieve this. And it's like, well, that's just your excuse to not try. And if you
Yeah,
embrace the constraint, you'll figure something out. You'll
yeah,
you'll get creative on a new dimension. Yeah,
absolutely.
I love it. So, are you still? Do you find that you are like teaching with this book now, as you're still like running workshops and coaching people? And I know you still do a lot of innovation work. Has it sort of transformed how you do the day-to-day work?
Yeah, surprisingly, it's like it is sort of a really easy guidebook, right? And
Hmm.
I think what I find for me is that it affirms something that I feel is evergreen, right? I
Hmm.
think you can write AI for the golden age, and like 5 years from now, that might be irrelevant, or fit what you may have written about AI 15 years ago might be irrelevant. But I think when it comes to sort of the mechanics, it's like the 22 immutable laws of marketing, right? It's a book that was written very
There you go.
analog and it still holds up. And so I'm always just kind of like, that still does work. So things like empathy. This was
Hmm.
the first sort of rule that I wrote about. Like, how does empathy go into the creation process? Like understanding deeply who you're creating for, that end user, who you're
Hmm.
creating with, like what's happening with your team, and understanding their strengths, gifts, weaknesses, hurdles, and then who you are in that process. Right, having empathy for yourself, and that is an ecosystem for creation. And it's funny, it's just the for me, it's the springboard. But then there's
Hmm.
things like hiring a team of misfit toys, you know, hiring for invisible skill sets and transferable skills and not necessary, which will then get you fresh eyes on a problem or an issue rather than somebody who has a resume that is stacked with the things that you need. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm just bringing that up as an idea and a concept that was presented in the book and still kind of holds true today, especially now with the world being topsy turvy. And it's like, the
Hmm.
number of layoffs that are happening and just where how people are feeling about what's going on. You have to be very, I don't know, observant and like how other people can be able to assist you in casting that vision.
Yeah. Were there, speaking of constraints, were there constraints on the book that changed sort of the
The
creative
first thing that
course of the
comes to
book?
mind is like, I remember I wanted the book to be out by Southwest, which is
Hmm.
in Austin. And so we started the process maybe the September before, like October maybe. So from
Hmm.
October to March to, to go from blank
Not a lot of
pages,
time.
not a lot of time. I remember specifically being at CES in Las Vegas. It was my birthday. I was also leading a team of maybe like 20 people. We were giving tours to clients all over the CES show floor. We were putting on a startup event, and I had to book time with you all to like review the book in quarters. So I had like all I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this week. Obviously I did, right? You talk about constraint. It's like that's
Yep.
4 days in a city of planning and leading and like presenting, and then also like reviewing. I don't even remember how many pages the book was, but it was no easy feat. It was 2 hours per quarter that I had to dedicate with you guys to like go through it. So, I think when you get squeezed through a portal like that, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm actually capable. I have a lot more capacity than I thought I may have. And that is, again, the best innovations come from constraint. I did,
Yeah.
I also was like achieving a new level of output, and, it becomes a new baseline after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's incredible. One of my like, out of the pocket taglines is like, we help busy people write books. And that's about as good of an example as I've ever heard of, everybody's busy. Everybody has a lot of commitments. We tend to work with coaches, entrepreneurs, executives. And it's like, yeah, you don't have 1,000 hours to put at a keyboard. You need like leverage and process, and you need to show up for that call with like a really, here's the 3 most important things that need to change about this, or that I want to reinforce or get filled in or whatever. And yeah, so that is a really, that is a good, we're not going to worry. We're not going to quibble about the commas. We're going to like tackle the big stuff
Yeah, exactly.
right away and stay on the timeline.
Those kind of constraints force you to really recognize what's important, right? And I think, as we talked about this on our last call, but like the commas and things, or sometimes even verbiage, like these kind of like, I'll call it minutia for the sake of the conversation. Not that I think every detail matters, but also some of them don't. Right. I remember speaking to a director friend of mine who's like a documentarian and, has made several award-winning documentaries. And I was like, do you ever feel like you're finished? And she goes, no. Like, there's always something I wish I could have changed, or I watch it and I go like, or you're never quite done with the process until you're finished. Right. Like
yeah. Yeah. Until it gets published, and then you start another one.
Exactly.
But and you remember that those things are invisible for pretty much everybody else. Okay, so we are now a little more than 8 years from the book being out. You were early with Scribe and publishing this. And that's a great opportunity, because most authors that we talk to and have on this podcast are pretty freshly published. And so they're still kind of like, how do I hit my stride? What's the long term of this thing? What is kind of the enduring impact of this book going to be? And I'm excited to kind of get an 8-year out snapshot of like, what is the payback start to look like? What is the, what things have you experienced as an author now for so long, and how it's impacted like your life and your work?
Yeah, that's such a great and loaded question. No,
yeah,
no,
yeah. That's like, here's a very big box. There's no constraints. Just tell me where you want to go.
Just go wild.
I'm just fishing for good stories in this very big lake.
I think I went into this. I think one of the best parts of the process was like, and I even use this to some degree in my coaching, is like, what do you want to get out of this process? And, the altruistic answer is like, I want to give people tools and wisdom and help their journeys be easier. And then the push that I was given from you all was, no, what do you want from it for yourself? And so to like really think selfishly and non-altruistically, I was like, I want to be able to introduce myself less. When I walk into a room, I want to have, people sort of already know how I think, what I've done, how I see the world. And in a lot of rooms, that was the case. I was thoroughly flabbergasted in a positive way about how receptive people were just to the fact that I'd written a book, not even having read a page. In some cases, they're like, oh, well, can you come speak to our thing? What's your book about? Oh, we need that. Right. Like the sort of ease that it created in some spaces. And then just to truly level set, it's like, it matters to a lot of people that it mattered to. And some people have never heard of me at all. And both of those, like being able to hold that duality and like the lesson of like, I am still who I am centered as a human being, but also like, yeah, like the creating that ease of an on ramp to a conversation or a project or an opportunity was really great. I've had gone to New Zealand, Australia, Africa, London. I did a book launch at South by Southwest as we did with the Michigan House. So, like that was my full circle moment, is like sitting and being interviewed by Josh Luber from StockX and going, this is, I mean, I'm a kid who left Detroit, went on a crazy series of journeys, and then here I am full circle with the things that I've learned. I mean, the opening of my book talks about how my first stand-up performance was at Michigan State University and how I compare stand-up comedy to innovation. So it was just like, it was this really wonderful tapestry of moments. But then sort of, to this day, I mean, I had a call 2 weeks ago and the guy was like, I had already read your book, and just kind of humbled by this conversation. And I'm like, kind of showing up almost with a little bit of dysmorphia. Like, it's just me. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and he's pouring it on thick, and kind of having had come across the book and some other things that the book led to. So.
Yeah. I say often that a book ends up being a force multiplier for everything else that you do in life. And so that kind of question, like, it opens doors that you didn't necessarily know were there. What are some of the things that you said that the book led to?
Two things come to mind. One was being able to create a workshop for the UN General Assembly. like,
Whoa.
Just on paper, I have no business doing that, right? But because this book was a tool, and because at the time they were knee deep in the sustainable development goals, and I had been, doing some work adjacent to fintech, financial technology, and we're like, to accomplish all of these goals, finance is a part of each and every one of them, and how we look and think about money. And so using these principles of innovation and empathy and tactical ingenuity to like go like, hey guys, have you ever thought about it this way? It's like, again, a little bit of imposter syndrome, a little bit of awe-inspired moment. And so that was a really cool like outcome. And I mean, I can tell you similar stories a dozen times over about that. And there was there's another one. Now I'm drawing a blank, but that one was pretty cool. That was one of my
Yeah,
favorites.
UN General Assembly is a really cool. I'm sure that's just a fascinating room.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Oh, I
I
remember
think
the other one.
oh,
It
please.
was the other one. I'd gotten invited to PayPal. And let's keep in mind that the book did become a number one bestseller in its category, and going to PayPal, working with their innovation team, and not only just being interviewed on stage, that was broadcast to the entire company. They had a book club already. And so my book was part of their book club. And then I got invited to just do an intimate Zoom kind of presence with that entire team. And it's just, it's just like, those are things you hear about, but you don't
Yeah.
necessarily experience until you experience it. And you're like, oh, people really do like, this is a possibility for me. And I think, yes, I think it opened up a floodgates of what even I thought was a possibility for my own career, my own journey.
Yeah, the doors you didn't even know were there. I think
Right.
that's such a cool thing. There's a few things that you exemplify in here that I think are really amazing and useful for authors. One is like, introduce yourself less, but not in the sense of like, I want to be a famous author. This in specific rooms is such a helpful and important frame of like, when the CMOs or chief innovation officers of like, the Fortune 1000 are in a room, I want 1/3 of the room to know who I am. Like, that's a really clear and specific goal that a book can absolutely help you achieve, that can totally change your life. But it's so much more specific and actionable than this, like, I want to be a famous author, I want to be on Oprah's couch kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, this specific rooms frame is really, really useful.
Yeah, I think even when I got introduced to Scribe, I think that was just conversationally and anecdotally, it was like, oh, if an author comes to us and says, I want a New York Times number one bestseller, like, that's a flag for us.
Yeah.
And it just, not that I was not that that's what I came to the table with, but it was a really good reframe. Like, I don't know, impact, I guess is more of a better word. Like, what impact do I want to have so that that third of the
Yeah.
people in the room is like, oh, yes, like these have been really good insights. I'm excited to hear or learn more from this person. And so, yes, there are a lot of different avenues of doing that, but I think a collection of thoughts, that are neatly laid out. And even as we were constructing the book, I was like, I'm a lazy reader. I want something that if I flip and I just randomly flip the book open, I can find something, and I don't want to have read chapter 4 to understand chapter 9. I'm like, I just want to be able to
Yeah.
extract one thing. And that's how I tried to create the book, so that if you read it linearly, great. If you just crack it open, also great. But yeah.
I think that is a very fun type of book to read and write. So I think that's a really also it's a constraint that helps you find your format,
Mm-hmm.
right? The other one that you mentioned was indirectly. It's like I think you said people were like reaching out to you who had probably not read the book, but you're like they they knew the book existed and they were like, I know this book existed. You're the kind of person, if you wrote this book, you're the kind of person we want to speak or lead or bring us in or teach my team. And I think maybe reasonably so for all the work that goes into writing a book, but God, so many more people hear of your book than ever actually read it, that it's easy to underestimate the impact. If you're like, oh, there's only, 1,000 people that are going to like read this thing. I hope I impact them. But it's like, yeah, but 100,000 people, for 1,000 people to read your book, 100,000 people will have heard of it. And that's actually, in so many cases, way more impactful than,
And I'll add to that. Like, I think, I talk about this concept of the invisible domino effect, right? So let's
mm,
say one person read the book and they used 30% of the principles in it. They're going to show up differently in the things that they are dedicated to. And then that person is going to go like, oh, you seem like I like that process we use. Oh yeah, I read it in this book. And then
yeah,
that if that person that who was having that conversation goes on to a new job or a new venture, they're going to be using that thing that they learned from that person. And so I find that, and this is, I talk about it in the book because for a long time in the agency world, our volume of ideation output far outweighed the things that were actually implemented. So it's just like
mm-hmm,
we might present Warner Brothers with 25 ideas, one of them gets picked, and even that one is torn apart and like bastardized in some way. And I had to go, the value of our thinking is that somebody's going to go, oh, I didn't know that. And then they're going to tell somebody else something that they've learned, and that person's going to implement it in some way. And there's this like invisible ripple effect that happens, just by like having tried to up your game 5%.
yeah, that's a fantastic story. I love these like tools of thought to help recontextualize this book and this author journey. So is there anything, what would you sort of offer as advice or earned wisdom for somebody who's maybe where you were 10 years ago, which is sort of contemplating the journey but feeling unclear? Maybe they haven't just had that like one moment of like this is happening and they're trying to figure out if this is the right road for them to go down.
It's, you got to have an appetite for exploration. I think most of us want to
Mm,
show up with the answer, or they want the answer easily, like in a box. And I think that, just using my lens, like innovation creativity is a very exploratory process. You step into it, you don't really know what you're going, you're heading in a direction, but you don't really know what the real outcome is going to be. And I think you have to like up your appetite for that unknown, that playing in the gray, way of being. So that's one. Two is, I'll speak for myself, it's just like the imposter syndrome is like, if I write it, will they come, kind of thing. And to your point, it's like a synopsis and a bio and outreach to the right handful of people can like really be your first exponential step,
mm-hmm.
and it was very affirming for me to go like, oh, people are reacting and responding already. And like, maybe I don't fully know why, but I do, right? Like it's that
Yeah.
underestimation of your own value when you're doing these things. So, and then, like we live in social media generation. It's like every other post is like, look what I've done, right? Look at the amazing things I've done. Or they're crying. Like it's just, it's like, it's, so we live somewhere in this like, oh, we need to sensationalize or we need to show up in a certain way or a certain perceived level of quality. And everybody starts with this baby step, the unknown, the like, maybe I should, like this, the sort of stutter stepping. And I think it's just embracing the process, like, and seeing where it
Yeah.
goes.
How did you win that wrestling match with imposter syndrome? I feel like that's a nearly universal experience for authors, in particular new authors, but everybody has it
Um,
to some extent.
well, the big answer is self love. That is
Yeah.
a practice that feels really strange at first to like whatever it is you think you want from other people when you walk into that room to go like, oh, you are the right person. You didn't fool us, right? Like whatever
Yeah.
imposter syndrome tells you is kind of just a reflection of your own sense of your own value. And so like it's kind of a, a tap on the shoulder to go, maybe we should work on this, right? From a tactical perspective, I was like, it just became a little bit of a superpower. It was like, well,
Hmm.
it's also a driver for me to do excellent work. It's a driver for me to show up and go above and beyond because I think that that I don't belong here. So guess what? I'm going to definitely prove it. And you can have a healthy relationship with that tension. I think that's where it gets troubling is when, it leads to all these other emotional experiences that are a little bit more challenging. I think, if you're talking about like some of the world's best basketball players, you talk shit to them on the court and you tell them they're not good enough. And you're like, oh, well, watch this, right? Like there's this like
Yeah.
bravado is there's almost like a leveling up that happens in that moment of doubt. And so it's finding your way to like use it as a leverage for tapping into a superpower.
Yeah. So much so that they would actually do that to themselves in some cases. Like I remember
Oh yeah.
watching the, yeah,
I mean, I
Jordan
used to run
documentary.
cross country and I remember like going on 10-mile runs for practice and I'd be like, talking shit to myself, like, you know, and like cussing myself out. And like, but it was, this is high school, but like it became like a weird motivational driver, like to really like, he's in the movies
Yeah.
and the crazy person slapping themselves. We're not allowed to say crazy anymore. Be careful. But yeah, so it can be a motivator if you learn to have a healthy relationship with it and don't let it like go off the deep end.
I love it.
And
Yeah.
there's also great books on it. There's books I've read on it and just kind of like studied it enough to go, okay, I'm okay.
Yeah. I like that you have a kind of almost opposing solutions at two different levels. It's like at a very high level, self-confidence and self-love, and at a very tactical level, like embrace it and use it to just do better work.
Yeah.
If you get those reversed, it's actually probably
Right.
not so practical, not such a good
Yeah.
outcome.
With any of those experiences, it's like it doesn't go away. I mean, even talking to you now, I'm like, oh, right. But I think it's you learn to better manage some of the things that get in the
Mm-hmm.
way. Like the bird that's talking on your shoulder, you're like, okay, not right now. Like, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, yeah, I know, you're having this, I know I'm terrible, right? You're like, it's just like, it's still there. It doesn't go away. It's just like, I'm gonna give it a little cracker. And this is a really crazy metaphor. So excuse me.
No,
But yeah.
it is useful, and it's probably useful to like externalize it metaphorically too, because it helps you understand that that I say all the time, and this is a good context for like writing a book isn't one decision to start; it's 1,000 decisions to not quit,
Mm-hmm.
and that imposter syndrome, I think, for a lot of people is that little bird saying like, you should quit, I'm giving you excuses to quit, like you're not good enough to finish this, you don't know what the next step is. And managing that voice, I mean, is why I wanted to kind of go so deep on it here, like managing that and knowing how to either give it a crack or give it a flick and just like get through the day, or at least like not quit that day even if you lose the
Mm-hmm.
battle that day, is a huge part of just continuing to move forward, which is how some of these big accomplishments get done.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I
Yeah.
mean, I think we all know how to perform despite ourselves. It's just when we're
Mm-hmm.
performing in a new domain, that like for some reason the rules change, right? And I think
Yeah, yeah,
learning a
yeah.
lesson as a writer, I mean, coming through the comedy and television world, just like writing is rewriting. You always got to do something over. And guess what? You're going to a writer's room every day. It doesn't matter if your mom yelled at you that morning or your kids misbehaving or you don't feel good. It's like you just show up and you put some words on the page and you'll have a chance to revisit it. And it may not feel like your best quality work, but I think sometimes like your feeling 70, 60% is still somebody else's 120, especially if you're an expert in this specific domain. So me writing about
Yeah.
innovation and creativity and like days where I wasn't feeling it, I'm like, I'm still like, people are still finding value in what I'm bringing to the table. I just have a different like lens of quality that I'm looking at.
No, this has been awesome, Chris. I appreciate so much the stories and the encouragement and the wisdom that I know is hard won and well earned. And it's great to meet a fellow Spartan on the road.
I know, man.
This is
Yeah.
fantastic. Where should people follow along to learn more about you, your book, the workshops you're doing, the type of work that you're up
I
to?
am Densonology on most social platforms.
Okay.
Pretty active, most on Instagram. LinkedIn is always pretty easy, and Visionology is what the practice is called. Kind of this level of tactical ingenuity and personal expansion simultaneously. I've been using that to like drive innovation forward.
Awesome. And I think the book is excellent and recommend it. And I learn something from you every time we talk. So I appreciate you taking the time to share with me and with our listeners.
Thanks,
Thank you
sir.
so much.
Yeah, absolutely.